Have you ever seen someone judged, not for what they do but for where they come from? The foyer of Crestwood Music Academy shimmered beneath a chandelier older than the city itself. Marble floors, gold-etched moldings, and the unmistakable hush of money in every corner. It was a place built to polish prodigies and preserve pedigree. And yet, that morning, someone entirely unexpected stepped through its grand oak doors. Her name was Amara Whitman. She wasn't wearing a blazer stitched with her family crest. She didn't carry a violin case handed down through generations. Instead, she wore a plain white t-shirt and jeans that had seen too many laundromats. Her hair was pulled back in a bun-tight, clean, and defiant. At just 18, Amara carried something rarer than legacy. She carried fire. She wasn't supposed to be there, not by their rules. You see, Amara didn't grow up in a world of pre-screen tutors and grand pianos. Her world was the far edge of the city where sidewalks crack under broken dreams, and the smell of bleach clings to your clothes long after your mother finishes her night shift. Their apartment was 3 rooms of hope held together by rusted plumbing and a blinking bulb that buzzed louder when you prayed for quiet. Amara's first piano was a battered keyboard rescued from a pawn shop. Half the keys stuck, and the volume button didn't work, but she played anyway. She played in silence when her little brother slept. She played in noise when the neighbors screamed. Her music didn't come from sheet music, it came from survival. Every night after her shift at a local restaurant, she'd sit down at that dusty keyboard and play Chopin, or Debussy, or Coltrane, if the mood was defiant. She learned it all through a cracked phone screen, rewinding YouTube tutorials like a lifeline. No teacher, no audience, just her and the music. But one night changed everything. That night, Amara played at the Blue Note, a dive bar with a piano as tired as its patrons. It was her side hustle tips in a jar, and maybe enough to cover her brother's textbooks. She played Clair de Lune, the way she felt it, not the way books told her. She let the silence breathe, let the sadness linger, and just like that, the room hushed. In the corner sat Professor Henry Carter, a faculty member at Crestwood, just stopping by for a late meal. But when Amara played, his fork stopped halfway to his mouth. His eyes narrowed. He didn't see a girl from the slums. He saw a voice the world hadn't heard yet. 2 days later, a letter arrived. Thick paper, gold crest, the seal of Crestwood Music Academy, an invitation to their open house, and a note, "Real music doesn't care where you come from. Come show them." Her mother cried when she read it. Her little brother jumped like they'd won the lottery. But Amara? She just stared at it, not with disbelief, but with that quiet, calm people mistake for uncertainty. It wasn't disbelief, it was restraint. She had no illusions. Crestwood wasn't built for girls like her. Still, on a Sunday morning, they drove there in her mother's rusted Corolla, parked between 2 Teslas, walked past manicured hedges and rose gardens that looked too perfect to be real. Every step toward the academy felt like walking deeper into someone else's dream. Inside, it was even more surreal. Parents in tailored suits whispered to one another, glancing sideways at the girl in sneakers. Students glided by with instrument cases worth more than her family's annual income. But Amara kept walking. She didn't flinch. She didn't fold. And then she saw it. The Steinway grand piano, resting in the center of the marble foyer. It wasn't just an instrument. It was a monument. The kind of piano that's touched by hands that fill stadiums. The kind of piano that ends up in museums after its final note. Her breath caught. She didn't touch it. Not yet, but she stood close enough to feel its presence. Her fingers itched, her body leaned forward. And that's when it happened. A voice, cold and sharp, sliced through the air. "What do you think you're doing?" Amara turned slowly. A girl stood nearby, maybe a year older, maybe not, but everything about her was precise emerald green dress, her sleek platinum hair pulled into a chignon, her posture honed like a weapon. Her name tag read, Chloe Spencer. Crestwood royalty. Chloe didn't wait for an answer. "That piano's worth more than your entire block," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "You don't just walk in and breathe on it." Laughter rippled nearby. Amara said nothing. Not at first. She didn't retreat. She didn't defend. She simply looked down at the keys. Then back up at Chloe. And what she said next? It changed everything. Amara didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't flinch. She looked Chloe Spencer straight in the eye and said, calm as still water, "Why don't we find out if I'm good enough to touch it?" The room went still, like someone had turned the sound off mid-sentence. One by one, the heads turned, first toward Amara, then toward Chloe. Some students smirked. Others raised brows, half amused, half intrigued. A few teachers paused mid-step, sensing something electric in the air. Chloe's lips curled, amused. "You want to play? Here?" Amara nodded once. "Here, now, just you and me, a solo each. You go first, since you've clearly claimed the piano." The confidence in her voice wasn't loud, but it was the kind that silenced noise. It was the kind that said, "I have nothing to lose." Chloe tilted her head, studying Amara like she was a strange insect under glass. Her expression flickered just briefly from smug superiority to something colder, calculating. Then, she smiled. "All right then," she said sweetly, though the venom laced every word. "When you lose, you'll walk out of here and never come back. Deal?" Amara's mother, Lena, who had finally made her way through the gathering crowd, placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. Her voice, soft but steel-lined, cut in, "We don't need to prove anything to anyone." But Amara's voice was steady. "It's not for them, Mama. It's for me." Lena looked into her daughter's eyes and nodded, slowly, letting go. Chloe clapped her hands lightly and gestured to the piano like a pageant queen presenting a prize. "Let's give our guest a show," she purred. She sat down like she was born for the bench, adjusted the height, placed her hands with perfect form. She announced her piece list's La Campanella, a notoriously difficult work known more for showmanship than soul. Her fingers launched into a blur of motion. She was, in every technical sense, brilliant. Every run, every trill, every jump from octave to octave executed with surgical sharpness. No wrong notes, no hesitation. It was clean, glittering, cold perfection. The crowd burst into applause before she even lifted her hands. Some students cheered. A few parents clapped with a kind of pride that had nothing to do with Chloe. It was for their own children, their own class. Chloe rose from the bench like a conquering queen. Her eyes gleamed. "Good luck," she said to Amara, smiling sweetly. "Try not to embarrass yourself." Amara stepped forward. No announcement, no flourishes, no grand gestures. She sat. Her fingers hovered. And then she played. Not Liszt, not something made for dazzling eyes. She chose Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, a quieter piece, deceptively simple. But it was her piece. And the moment the first note sang through the air, the room changed. It wasn't perfect, not the way Chloe's performance had been. There was no blazing speed, no dramatic flair, just breath, space, and emotion that lingered in the air like candle smoke. Every note was a memory, a scar, a secret. She played like someone who had learned to survive in the dark. The crowd didn't make a sound. Even the ones who had laughed earlier sat forward in their chairs, their faces slack with something they didn't expect to feel. A girl in pearls wiped a tear without realizing it. A boy clutched the edge of his program as if he might fall into the notes. Even the janitor paused, mop in hand, standing perfectly still by the velvet ropes. At the edge of the foyer, Lena held her breath. Her calloused hands clenched the strap of her purse. She'd heard this piece before when Amara played it after learning the electricity would be cut for the third time that month, when she'd played it after their landlord raised the rent, when she'd played it to keep from crying. But here, it was different. It was defiance turned to beauty. The final notes floated upward and disappeared into the chandeliers above. For a beat, no one moved. Then, applause. Not polite, not obligatory, but rising, roaring. Louder than Chloe's. Chloe's face paled. Her smile, so fixed, faltered. Her friends didn't cheer. They looked around, unsure. A few even clapped awkwardly, hesitantly, as if drawn into something too powerful to resist. Amara stood up. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She simply looked at Chloe and said, quietly, "Your turn." Chloe blinked. "Excuse me?" Amara gestured toward the crowd. "You made a deal. If I lost, I'd leave. I didn't. A pause. Everyone was watching. Chloe's jaw tightened. Her emerald dress glittered like armor, but it couldn't shield her from what came next. A voice cut through the silence. She's right. It was Professor Carter. He stepped forward from the crowd. His suit was rumpled, and his eyes gleamed with something fierce. Miss Whitman didn't just play. She revealed something most of us have forgotten. He turned to Chloe. Do you have anything to say? Chloe swallowed. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Finally, with her shoulders rigid and her voice a brittle whisper, she said, I was wrong. I'm sorry. It wasn't gracious, but it was enough. Amara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because in that moment, everyone already knew. The girl in the plain white shirt didn't just belong at Crestwood. She had claimed it. The applause eventually faded, but the energy in the room lingered like a held breath that refused to let go. Amara stood by the Steinway, her fingers still tingling, her pulse slowing but not yet steady. What she had done hadn't just silenced a room, it had cracked something deeper. And cracks, if you press just right, become openings. Professor Carter stepped beside her, his presence calm but commanding. Miss Whitman, he said, his voice cutting through the crowd like a clear bell, we'd like to speak with you in the faculty office. Whispers followed her as she walked away, some full of awe, some still laced with suspicion. Not everyone was ready to accept what they'd witnessed, but that no longer mattered. The piano had spoken for her. And no one could unhear what it said. Lena followed quietly, her navy dress clinging slightly from the nerves, her grip firm on Amara's hand. The corridors they walked through were lined with portraits' faces frozen in time, names gilded beneath them. Every frame whispered legacy, tradition. But Amara's footsteps were loud enough to answer back. Inside the oak-paneled office, Professor Carter took his seat beside a woman Amara hadn't yet met. She looked to be in her late 50s, silver hair pinned back into a tight twist, her eyes sharp behind elegant glasses. Her nameplate read, Dr. Evelyn Hart, Dean of Students. She didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. She studied Amara for a moment, then gestured to the empty chair. Sit. Amara did. Dr. Hart folded her hands. What you did out there, she said slowly, was not only brave, it was real. I've heard hundreds of auditions, maybe thousands. I've seen perfect form, impeccable technique, but very little truth. She leaned forward slightly, voice low but piercing. And you, Miss Whitman, despite the odds, played with a truth I haven't felt in this building for years. Amara didn't know what to say. She gripped the edge of the chair to keep her hands from trembling. Professor Carter slid a folder across the desk. Inside it was a single page, a scholarship agreement. Full tuition, room and board, instrument stipend, faculty mentorship. Effective immediately. Amara blinked. You're offering me a place here? Dr. Hart nodded once. No tests, no recitals, no letters of recommendation. You've already passed the only test that matters. Amara stared at the paper like it might vanish. From behind her, Lena's breath caught, and for a long second, neither mother nor daughter moved. Then Lena exhaled slow, trembling, grateful. Baby, she whispered, you did it. Amara didn't cry, not yet, but she reached out, picked up the pen, and signed her name with the kind of clarity she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just a signature. It was a vow. By the time they stepped out of the office, the afternoon sun had started to bend into evening light. The corridors, once crowded, were quieter now, just a few remaining visitors chatting, a few faculty members exchanging final words. And then she saw her, Chloe Spencer. No longer radiant in green silk, no longer surrounded by admirers, she stood near the bulletin board, arms crossed, face unreadable. She looked smaller somehow. Amara paused. Lena reached out to guide her forward, but Amara gently stopped her. Let me, she said softly. She walked toward Chloe slowly, deliberately, and stopped just short of her. Chloe didn't speak first. For once, she didn't take the lead. So Amara did. I didn't come here to take anything from you, she said, not with anger, but quiet clarity. I came to earn a chance to be heard. That's all. Chloe's arms loosened, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. You didn't just earn it, she said after a beat, her voice low, tired, but real. You snatched it out of the sky like it was always yours. That made Amara smile, just a little. Music's not about winning, she said. It's about telling the truth. You're good, Chloe. You just forgot how to feel it. Chloe didn't reply right away, but then, almost too quietly to catch, maybe you can remind me. It wasn't a friendship, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was something, a fracture in the ice. Amara turned away, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Later that evening, in the silence of their tiny apartment, Lena taped the Crestwood letter to the refrigerator, right next to Jamal's science project and a faded grocery list, as if it were just another part of the family's rhythm. But they both knew it wasn't just a letter. It was a door. A door Amara had kicked open not with rage, not with protest, but with music, with something no one could take from her, no matter how many rooms they tried to lock. That night, for the first time in years, Amara didn't touch her old keyboard. She didn't need to. Tomorrow, she'd play something grander. But tonight, she let the silence hold her like applause that didn't end. 6 months later, the Steinway in Crestwood's main auditorium gleamed beneath a constellation of stage lights. The velvet curtains swayed gently as the spring recital prepared to reach its final act. The crowd, an ocean of silk ties, pearl earrings, and carefully folded programs buzzed with polite anticipation. 2 names were printed side by side on the final page of that program: Amara Whitman and Chloe Spencer. No one would have imagined it, not 6 months ago. The girl from the slums and the girl from the spotlight. But music, true music, has its own strange logic. It breaks down what status builds up. And sometimes, it builds something entirely new. Backstage, Amara adjusted her simple black dress. It had been Lena's surpriser gift bought quietly, saved up dollar by dollar over months. Her coiled hair was pulled back into a graceful bun, her fingers resting on her lap with quiet poise. Chloe stood beside her. Her ivory gown shimmered, but it no longer felt like armor. Her once icy posture had softened. The distance between them, once carved from pride and resentment, had narrowed note by note, rehearsal by rehearsal. The 2 girls hadn't become best friends. They probably never would. But something better had bloomed: respect. Professor Carter had assigned them Schubert's Fantasia in F minor, a 4-hands duet requiring trust, precision, and unity. It wasn't a choice, it was a challenge. Their first rehearsals had been tense. Chloe, technical and controlling; Amara, expressive and free. They clashed in tempo, in phrasing, in posture. But music has a funny way of humbling everyone. Eventually, they began to listen not just to the score, but to each other. They found a rhythm that wasn't just in sync but in balance. And now, they were about to show the world what that balance could do. The stage manager signaled. Amara inhaled. Chloe nodded. Together, they stepped into the spotlight. A hush fell across the room. They sat, Amara to the left, Chloe to the right. Their hands hovered above the keys knot, quite touching. The silence before the first note stretched, fragile and full. Then, Amara began. The opening chord was solemn, like a voice speaking for the first time in a long while. Chloe followed, weaving in gently, her notes crystalline, elegant. The contrast was striking soulful warmth and aristocratic clarity, but instead of clashing, they danced. The music built like a conversation, at times intimate, at times furious, then tender again. You could hear where they had fought, where they had compromised, and where they had found each other. The crowd leaned forward, eyes wide, hearts drawn in. Parents stopped whispering. Students forgot to check their phones. Even faculty members who had doubted Amara's place at Crestwood exchanged silent glances of astonishment. And Lena, sitting in the front row, wearing a vibrant royal blue dress she hadn't dared wear in years, clasped her hands over her chest. Tears glistened in her eyes, but her face held only one expression: pride. Beside her, Jamal sat stiffly in a little blazer and a clip-on tie. He leaned toward her and whispered, "She's playing for us, Mama." Lena nodded. She always was. On stage, the duet reached its climax. Amara's part swelled with fire. Chloe steadied it with grace. They moved in sync, hands nearly brushing as they crossed octaves, and came back together again, chasing and catching the music like it was a living thing. And finally, after a breathless run of notes, the last chord fell like a closing door. Silence? Then thunder. The crowd erupted. A standing ovation louder than anything else that night. Some were clapping for Amara. Some were clapping for Chloe. But most were clapping for the possibility of what they had just witnessed. On stage, the two girls stood. They glanced at each other, an unspoken moment, and clasped hands. It wasn't theatrical. It was genuine. Chloe leaned closer, just enough for Amara to hear. "You made me better." Amara smiled. "You made me braver." Backstage, after the applause had died and the lights dimmed, Amara found her mother waiting with open arms. "You changed something tonight," Lena whispered through tears. "Not just here, out there too." And she was right. Word of the performance spread. It became more than a school recital, it became a story. One passed from parent to child, teacher to student, neighborhood to city. A story of a girl who crossed a divide without losing herself. Within weeks, Crestwood opened a new scholarship initiative aimed at finding unheard voices in forgotten places. It was called the Whitman Award. The blue note, where it all began, framed a photo of Amara beside the dusty piano, under a plaque that read, "She played truth into the silence." And across the city, in a dozen community centers and overworked school music rooms, children placed their fingers on plastic keyboards and whispered her name with wonder. Amara didn't become a symbol by trying to be one. She simply told the truth with music. So now I ask you, have you ever heard someone play and suddenly feel your own heartbeat in their song? Have you ever witnessed a room change not because someone demanded it, but because they earned it? That was Amara Whitman. She didn't break into Crestwood. She retuned it, one note at a time.